make sure that your expectations are objectively accurate. Sometimes we have big dreams and goals and visions for ourselves, which is good, but we overestimate our ability to achieve those things in a certain period of time. The saying goes, we overestimate our abilities in the short term and underestimate our abilities in the long term. And the way you're phrasing that question has me wondering if you're thinking that more is going to happen immediately when it just takes time. Kipp, what's up, brother? So great to see you. I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. And this is crunch time for both of us as we prepare for our trip next week. So I know both of us are busy. So I'm thinking to myself, let's just get right into it today.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Vacations always start once we know what the schedule is, but there's always a little bit of prep time. First world problems, of course, right? Like, who are we complaining about it? About going to Molokai for a week?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys are probably like, oh, it's so hard for you guys. You have to go to Hawaii and go hunt axis deer. It must be really hard. How rough your life is. So yeah, we're not trying to rub that in by any means. I think I'm just excited. I think you are too.
My team this morning, I was talking to them. I'm like, my focus this week is just to not leave anybody high and dry next week since I'm out of the office. And they're like, oh, that's right. You're going to be in Hawaii killing poor, innocent, beautiful animals. I'm like, yes, I am.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I don't know if I'd say killing poor, beautiful, innocent animals. Shooting at them, definitely. Killing them, that's to be determined.
Good point. Good point.
Let's just get that right. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And if you don't like it, well, deal with it. All right, man. Should we get into some headlines today? I'm actually taking a page from your playbook. I came across this little synopsis of a gentleman by the name of Robert McGee. In 1864, he had a very interesting incident, we'll say. And I just thought it was amazing. And we don't build them like we used to. That's what I'm going to say here. So here's the snippet. Robert McGee scalped at the age of 14 in 1864. McGee was working as a teamster with H.C. Barrett to transport a caravan of flour to Fort Union in New Mexico territory. Whilst on the road, somewhere around Kansas, the wagon train was set on by a band of Brule Sioux Native Americans, resulting in the majority of the teamsters being tortured and killed. McGee was shot in the back. Remember, he's 14 years old. Shot in the back, had 2 arrows put through him, as well as 64 square inches removed from his scalp, all whilst he was still awake. His survival was miraculous, and then there's a photo of him taken in 1890 as an older man. But I'm just thinking to myself, this is a 14-year-old kid, number one, working with the Teamsters, transporting, I don't know where exactly he was going, but transporting on a train in the New Mexico territory, which was obviously, unconquered at that time, and then just brutally assaulted, left for dead, shot in the back, 2 arrows in him, scalped 64 inches of his scalp removed. I'm glad that we don't live in those times. And it's really interesting when people say things like, you hear this a lot about the victims and the complainers about how horrible America is and how bad current society and culture is. Point to me another time in which you would like to live where you think it would be better. There isn't one. We live in the most prosperous, free, safest time that we've ever lived as human beings. And I think it's good to look at some of these things to remember who our great-great-great-grandfathers were, what they did to be able to provide these opportunities for us, and that we live in a pretty good time, all things considered.
That's funny. This reminds me, this past weekend when we go to the lake, we often go to church in that small town. And it's a small town. It's a agricultural farming town. And Asia told me about this on Sunday. She goes, in our class, the teacher brought up like Simon Sinek's, the why, like what's your why? And this 80-something-year-old woman in her class goes, "What do you mean, why?" Yeah, like, why? And they're like, because you do the right thing, right? Like, and it was kind of like, and when
it's hard to
yeah, and when she
articulate.
shared it with me, I was like, that's actually kind of funny. Where we have gotten so like, let's define everything and let's like clarify. And this old woman's like, you do what you're supposed to do. I don't need a why. I don't need to articulate.
That's
and I'm
it.
like, there's something to be said for the simplicity of it. And we almost created so many talking points to explain things when in reality, we just need to do what we know we should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the relative ease of modernity in which we live, where everything is subject to debate. Look, I know I've been bagging on Andrew Huberman on this podcast a little bit. I don't get it. I just don't get it. But that's not what I'm going to say. He had this clip, this like 4-minute clip with some other guy, who knows, that over-explains everything, and both of them are just yapping at each other about things that have already been solved. And they're complaining. One guy's like, Huberman's talking about the importance of meat, which is unequivocally true. Like, human beings need protein. It's just not subject to debate at this point. And the other guy, he looks kind of like a weenie. He's kind of like wiry and doesn't have any muscle mass, and probably couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper sack. He's talking about how if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, then the body blah 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 blah. And I wrote on there, I'm like, guys, look, this is not, and I think Huberman's caption was, "This is interesting." No, it's not. It's not interesting. This problem has been solved. This problem has been addressed. Now, if we want to talk about the way to create sustainability with our protein sources, our vegetable sources, I'm all for that discussion. But the debate as to whether or not human beings eat meat is not really subject to debate at this point. If you want to be a vegetarian or a vegan, all the power to you. Go ahead and do it. Just know your diet is inferior, and that's fine. You have to compensate with supplements and other things, and there's obviously a loss of muscle mass and reduction. Sure, you're performing at a lower standard. That's fine if you want to do that. But that's not the question. And it isn't only until the relative ease of modernity, to wrap it back up on what we're talking about, where people have even called this into question. Yeah. We've created such an incredible society that people can question whether or not they should eat meat. Of course you should eat meat. Oh, well, I had one guy. Why wouldn't we talk about this meat agenda? There's no meat agenda. There's human beings. We eat meat. Well, why wouldn't we talk about it when we can find better ways to do it? There isn't a better way to do it.
That's funny.
We're evolved species to consume meat. The discussion is over. It's so funny to me that we just debate and bicker over bullshit that just isn't worth discussing. So anyways, there's my little rant.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I even hate my rant, my headline a little bit, to be honest with you, because I'm like, it's just a repeat of the same thing, of people in power practicing, what we talked about last week, unrighteous dominion and manipulating things to get votes, right? And I'm just tired of it. I mean, what I was going to talk about is just, officially as of last week, right? The Biden administration is going to cancel another $7.7 billion in student loans that will roughly benefit 160,000 people. Here's the crazy thing. Guess what the total student loan forgiveness has been during his administration? Total.
Oh, I don't. Tens of billions, maybe more.
$167 billion.
Oh, geez.
And it's just unfair, right? Not everyone's going to get their debt forgiveness. So where do you draw the line, right? How about the people that are still paying student loan debt and other people don't? And it's inconsistent. It's unfair. And to say this will not cause inflation issues is naive. Often what I like, and I don't know this is a pipe dream, but what I would love for every single spending of government for them to explain where the money's going to come from and what are they going to stop doing that they're doing today to be able to pay for that thing. But we're like children with a credit card, and we just spend and print money that doesn't exist. And it's like, this doesn't even work this way in the real world, right? If I'm going to spend money on something, then I'm not going to have that money for something else. What are we giving up? And yet we're not having that conversation. And this is just, I think, an obvious attempt of buying, younger votes, right? And to get some momentum. And it's not ideal for the country nor for the economy.
Yeah. I mean, look, I could go off on a tirade with all this stuff too. I mean, it's, when you said, where do you draw the line? I have a line. If you incurred the debt, then you pay for it. There's the line. That's the line. Now, look, we can actually have, and I'm trying to be intelligent about this, rational about it. We can have a discussion as to whether or not college ought to be free, so to speak, or I should say funded by taxpayers. We can have that discussion. I don't know that that's the case necessarily. I even if I believe that were the case, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the government being the one to administer it because they're so successful with every other program they've ever implemented. So I don't think that's the solution, but we can have that discussion. But in the meantime, these kids are incurring the debt, and part of the problem is that when the government comes in and subsidizes and rescues, you have one side of the equation who complains about these bloated corporations who are just greedy and just trying to squeeze every dollar they can out of the American citizen. What do you think universities are trying to do? And the reason they're able to get away with it is because the government is coming in and subsidizing it. So what do you think that does to tuition rates? When people say, well, we should drive our tuition rates down, and also we should have the government pay for it. Those two concepts are antithetical to each other. You cannot drive the rate down of something while having this bloated institution, AKA the United States government, come in and pay for it all. Because what ends up happening is it's now backed and collateralized, and so these institutions know that they're going to get their payment. So instead of charging $1, they're now going to charge $1.50 or $2 because they know they're going to receive it. So if you're thinking to yourself, we need tuition rates to be lower and we also need the government to pay off student loans, you're ignorant at best. At best, you're an idiot more likely because you just don't understand basic economics. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you're evil because you're actually perpetuating the lie on purpose. So you either fall into one of those three camps, and all are horrible and ought to be rejected, and these people ought to be ridiculed, mocked, and kicked out of society because they're just creating a worse place for us.
Here's a perfect example of this. Years ago, I had a client out in Boston, and at the time, Boston's medical was state funded, if you remember correctly. And I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was. And I flew out to Boston to meet.
Massachusetts, I'm sure.
I flew out to Boston to meet with this particular client, and we're reviewing business processes and efficiency gains, and possibly do like an upgrade to their systems, right, to drive efficiency. I spent an entire week deep diving into their business, and I came up with a proposal, right, in regards to savings. And they decided to go against it. And they're like, no, we're not going to move that direction. And I felt like I had a strong relationship with one of the directors. And I said, hey, help me understand. And I don't remember his name, but I'm like, help me understand. Like, this is a no-brainer, right? By implementing this system and updating these business processes, we're going to be able to save you guys like the equivalent of millions of dollars in process and efficiency. Why wouldn't we go this direction? And he goes, oh, Kipp, you misunderstand. We have no driver to be more efficient. We get government funding for what we do, whether we're efficient or not. So there's no reason for us to make the investment. And I was just like, so backwards. But that's a prime example of what.
Well, thanks for wasting my time, dumbass.
But it's a prime example of what happens
Why'd they bring
I have
you in?
no idea. I think they were just looking to move to another system. And I probably could have came in there and said, it's going to cost you more money. And they're like, oh, awesome. We'll get more budget for it. And I was naive, and I went there with the focus of efficiency. And they're like, there's no reason for us to be more efficient. We don't get less or more money if we're efficient. Prime example. Prime example. All right, man. Should we get to our questions?
We're done. I don't know if this is redeemable. Actually, I'm feeling very pessimistic today. I don't know if this is redeemable. We're done.
Yeah.
Seriously, our country's done. We're done. I think there's enough great people out there, that if we all rally together and use some common sense, that we could probably change the tide of things. But the way it is right now, we're done. It's just a matter of time. The Walking Dead at this point.
Crazy. It's craziness. Did you see the T-shirt recommendation from Inside the Foundry? That was super funny. Did you see this?
No, I didn't see it. No, what did it
say? Someone said, here, I'll pull it up because I'm going to give credit because it's actually hilarious. It was Ryan Parton. He says, can we get a Michler Sorensen 2024 campaign shirt in the store with the tagline, making masculinity great again? I'm like, that's clever.
I'm in. Let's do it. I'm going to write that down.
I'm like, that's funny.
Let's do it.
Making masculinity great again. I'm like, that's great.
Okay.
Clever.
I'm on it. I'm on it.
All right.
All right, man. Let's get into some questions today.
So if you want to follow Michler on the gram or X, that's at Ryan Michler. Our first question, George Goldstrom. Ways to deal with self-doubt, anxiety, and depression for an owner-operator of a construction company with big dreams and a family to provide for.
First, so doubt, anxiety, and depression, correct?
Self-doubt, anxiety, and depression.
So a couple of things. Number one, you need to know that's normal. I think that we have made that such a taboo subject that anytime that you feel anxious or depressed or any self-doubt, there's something wrong with you. There really isn't. There's nothing at all wrong with you. We all have self-doubt. We all are anxious at times. We all get depressed. Clinically, chronically depressed is something different. And if we're talking about chronic depression, I would say go get some medical help that you need because you need some work through that. But if we're just talking about moments of being down or frustrated because things aren't going our way, that's completely different. And I think the first thing you really need to realize is that this is all normal. It's all part of the human experience. We don't need to make it something that it isn't. We don't need to make it seem as if there's something wrong with you when there isn't. But that's not to say that we shouldn't tackle it. And the first thing I would suggest to you is make sure that your expectations are objectively accurate. Sometimes we have big dreams and goals and visions for ourselves, which is good, but we overestimate our ability to achieve those things in a certain period of time. The saying goes, we overestimate our abilities in the short term and underestimate our abilities in the long term. And the way you're phrasing that question has me wondering if you're thinking that more is going to happen immediately when it just takes time. Now, that's not to discount everything else that you might be experiencing. There might be more efficient ways. There might be a different market segment that you need to capture. You might need to market in a new and unique way that other people aren't doing. But ultimately, I think if you find joy and satisfaction in the process, and then I've said this before and I continue to reiterate this, you bring in the right people. You might need some coaching and consulting. We talked about this the other day, in fact, where the podcast lighting. Kipp, I've spent hours and hours and hours trying to get my studio lighting just right. And it looked pretty good. It was like, oh, this looks good. But it just wasn't quite there. So I reached out. I had a videographer. And I said, hey, man, can you come in and consult? And he's like, yeah, I'll come in and consult with you. So he came over to my place. Within 5 minutes, I think I told this story last week. Within 5 minutes, he had drastically improved the lighting. He was here for about an hour. I paid him $120 and instantly immediate results. I'm talking about, and I'm not exaggerating, within 5 minutes, and we're using one less light than we were actually using before. This is a perfect illustration of bringing the right people in and setting aside the ego, being humble, understanding that you don't have it all figured out. And by the way, don't try to figure it all out. Because here's the thing, you could. Most of us are smart enough to figure it out. This guy's in the construction business, it sounds like. Over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, he's probably going to be a multimillionaire if he sticks with it. He's intelligent enough, he's smart enough, he's going to succeed over 40 years. Why wait that long? You could hire people now and take what would take you 20 years and just cram all of that knowledge and expertise and learning into 2 to 5 years. And so people will say, well, but I don't have the money. It's expensive. It costs too much. If you think that costs too much, what do you think is going to happen to your cost over 20, 30, 40 years if you trying to figure out things the hard way and banging your damn head against the wall? So let's get over this thing of I can figure it out. I can do it my own way. I can do it all myself. That's ego. That's arrogant. It's hard-headed. It's stubborn. I get it. I've been there, but it's dumb. So bring the right people in, put them in the right places, pay and compensate them well to be involved in your organization. And I think you'll start to notice yourself taking bigger strides than you thought were possible in this micro.
I love the analogy you always use of the dashboard indicators in your car, right? And I love self-doubt might be an indicator. Anxiety is an indicator. Depression is, these are things that we're dealing with that we should deal with, and they're difficult. Of course there's anxiety to owning your own business. I'm sure there's numerous times in your career, and I know there have been in mine, where I'm up all night. I can't sleep because I'm stressed out. But it's the stress of it that makes me double down and like, I got to resolve this and I have to deal with it, right? And so I love the idea of just normalizing difficulty a little bit here and saying, hey, this is part of the bag, right? This is part of growth. Now, with that said, I found this quote that I love. I don't know who said it, but I think it's a thought or a consideration for George. If you are depressed, you're living in the past. If you are anxious, you're living in the future. If you are at peace, you're living in the present. For me, I love that quote, and I love that quote because it's true for me. Often when I have anxiety, it's because I'm stressing about something that I don't even know what will happen. And I'm jeopardizing the moment. I'm jeopardizing the moment with my children, the time at the lake, the opportunities of a relationship and a great conversation with someone for something that has not even yet happened. And so for me, that resonates, that quote resonates because it's what I need to do often is get present and realize where I'm at, prioritize and execute what's within my realm of control and take action right now in the moment and stop stressing about something outside of my realm of control. All right, Dave Berg, 0, can you take too much accountability? If so, how do you know when you're doing it?
I don't think you can take too much accountability. And here's what I mean. I know where you're going with the question. You can't, because you can't take accountability for something that isn't yours to take accountability for. So you can overstep the line, but I wouldn't consider that taking accountability. I would consider it you being a punching bag or you misunderstanding what accountability actually is. Kip, for example, I can't take accountability for your actions. There, in no world can I. I can try. I can say it's my fault. I can pretend like I have some sort of authority and control over you, but I don't. So I literally cannot take accountability for your life. It would just be misguided at best. But when we're talking about accountability, when I hear that word, what comes to mind for me is taking responsibility for the things within your control. So let's say you're in a marriage and it takes 2 to tango. And there's a lot of issues that you brought to the table which caused the breakdown of your marriage. You can and should take accountability for that. But you can't take the accountability from her, which is that she contributed to that. Maybe she didn't share as much as she needed to. Maybe she wasn't as forthright about what she needed to come clean with. I mean, there's all sorts of things that it could be. You can't take ownership of that. It's just not yours to possess. So
Totally.
in the spirit in which you're asking, yes, I think you probably can. But if we're actually using the definition of the words the way I understand them, no, you can't take too much accountability because it's only what you can control.
Totally. You know, when we see this the most, Brian, is in corporate America, when companies take on extreme ownership, and you'll get leaders going, you know, they'll have an employees make a mistake or whatever, and they're like, what, you know, I'll take ownership. And it becomes like this talking point of this high level, I'm going to take ownership and accountability, but it lacks the discipline. It lacks the creativeness to determine what are you taking responsibility for, right? You can't just blanketly say, that's on me as the leader, I take ownership. No. It's the next step. What are you taking ownership of? What are you choosing to take responsibility for? What specific things could you have adjusted to help address the given issue? If you haven't done that part, you're not really taking accountability. You're really not taking ownership over anything. You're just saying it because that's the right thing to say, and it's this talking point. And so I think we're saying the same thing. I just think sometimes even human nature is to latch on to extreme ownership and say, well, I should take ownership of all things. But it requires some critical thinking on your part of, well, what specifically? Hey, you know what? I could have handled this differently. Literally, I had an employee, as an example, really quick. I had an employee leave on Friday, kind of abruptly. Good employee too. And she gave her notice and left on Friday. And the feedback I got from her at first glance had me pointing fingers at a lot of different sources, right? Oh, this is where they went wrong. This is where they went wrong. This is where they went wrong. And those all could be true. The problem, though, is I don't learn. As long as the problem is always somewhere else, you will never consider your role in it. Thus, you will never grow. So in that example, I thought, okay, how do I take ownership of this? How do I take some accountability? Okay, what was our vetting process? Did I confirm that she was clear on the roles and responsibility? Did I do my 30-day check-in with the new hire to make sure that things were aligned? How's this? Are you ready for this? If I had my 30-day check-in, did she tell me that she was unhappy? And if she didn't, how am I showing up in the organization where someone doesn't feel like they can be honest with me? Right now we start getting to areas where I can take some responsibility. It's within my realm of control, but it requires some critical thinking. It's usually never surface level.
You know, I agree with everything you're saying. I want to take the other side of the coin, though, because again, this goes back to the spirit in which it was asked. I agree with everything that you said, but let me paint another scenario. You're a project manager at work. You've got all the right pieces, all the right players in place, everything's firing correctly, and you just miss the deadline, or it flops, or it doesn't work. And there's one specific employee, team member, that you've identified that is incapable of doing the job you need them to do. So extreme ownership taken to the excess says, oh, well, you know, like I need to train her better. I need this, I need that, and it's all on me. In that scenario, taking ownership might actually be letting go of that employee.
Totally.
And that's where a little bit of the challenge comes in, because when you hear extreme ownership, you think, well, it couldn't possibly be the employee. No, it actually could be the employee. You hired her or him.
Yeah.
So the extreme ownership is hire the right people. The other part of extreme ownership is you didn't hire the right person, and you need to let that person go so you can bring the right player in. And that's not to say that you shouldn't train them and give them adequate tools. There's things that come before firing somebody. But I just want to make sure I illustrate that point as well. But I really like what you said about this showmanship, is what I would call it. This theater. And I'm reminded as you were talking about that when there's an episode of The Office when Dwight and Andy are doing favors for each other, but they don't want to be the last person. They want to be the last person to do the favor for the other because they don't want to owe anybody anything else.
Good.
So they're always just one-upping each other.
Yeah.
Like one guy opens the door and the other goes and gets donuts and the other one files his papers for him. And they're just one-upping each other just so they don't have to be beholden to anybody else. And I kind of think that's what happens.
Funny.
This is a little bit of marketing that takes place when a word or a concept gets latched onto. We begin to bastardize it and just like whore it out to everything. A great example of that in the psychological world is this term narcissist. Okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody is a narcissist. Just because you don't get along with a person or they happen to be self-absorbed or their viewpoint conflicts with yours, that's not what a narcissist means. There's actual definitions for words. And so we have to be a little careful because marketers, I'm a marketer, Jocko's a marketer, Jordan Peterson's a marketer, Andrew Huberman's a marketer. They're marketing different things and different messages, but we're all marketers. They get a hold of concepts and words, especially a guy like Jordan Peterson who's so good with his words, it just becomes a little pop culture-ish, and we begin to lose the actual meaning of the word itself or the message.
Yeah, and I think we do it. We do it in organizations all the time.
Of course.
We latch
Jargon,
on to
lingo.
like outward mindset, and now the answer is always outward mindset. Everything's outward mind. It's like, oh my gosh, like don't lose sight of the actual principle of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? It becomes almost like an easy button.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
I love it. All right, important to me. TRT is a popular item right now. Sales is pitching in all directions on social media. I feel like it's getting men over that hump over overwhelming life and lack of sleep. I've never taken anything, but now I'm thinking I want to feel my young self again. What natural habits have you implemented or heard we should implement in our lives that don't have side effects and are proven to work?
Well, that's our testosterone booster shirt. Like if you want to boost your testosterone again, to go back to what's subject to debate and what isn't,
Good call.
really it's this. It's you have to eat meat. That is actually scientifically proven to be true. You have to eat protein, high levels of protein. That will increase testosterone production. You have to get plenty of rest. That isn't popular in the men's circle, but you do have to get plenty of rest. You have to lift heavy objects. Not just go run and do cardio all the time. You actually have to lift heavy weights. You need to spend time around other men and specifically compete and even more specifically win. It's been proven that winning competitions increases testosterone production. Losing competition decreases testosterone production. Outside of that, engage in manly activities. Fighting, physicality, shooting guns, explosions, enjoying nature, hiking, what we would typically associate with manly activities. You have to actually engage in those. And those are all scientifically proven to boost testosterone production. So I would suggest that you go, reduce alcohol intake is a big one. I would definitely recommend that you do that first before you start looking into testosterone replacement stuff, like the TRT stuff. Once you get into doing that, that is likely going to be a lifelong decision for you. So there are instances where I think that makes a lot of sense. But also, I don't think it's a magic pill in that if you just do your testosterone replacement stuff, that all of a sudden you can just forsake everything else I just told you and be fine. No, you have to continue to do the other activities, and that's going to magnify and enhance the results that you get from TRT. So those are the activities. It's pretty straightforward. It's things we all know we should be doing.
Yeah. Hey, are you going to get those shirts again?
I might just to piss people off. That's hilarious to me.
I need
people
another.
Get so mad.
I gave that shirt away to someone at Ragnar a couple of years ago. Someone's like, "Dude, I love that shirt," and we traded shirts. And I thought, "Oh, I'll just buy another one." And then you stopped making them. So
maybe I'll do it just to piss people off because I don't know what it was about that shirt, but that just fired people up, and I loved it.
That's funny. All right.
Oh, and have sex. That was the other one on there. Have sex.
Yeah,
that's another one.
Have sex.
Yep.
Yeah.
Intimacy is another one.
All right. The electrifier. What would you do if your partner of 4 years told you that you were to leave the home in 24 hours, or she would serve a trespass notice. That's all the details we got.
Oh, I would just hire an attorney. Like that's it. I don't know. I don't know the laws of your state. I don't know what the personal circumstances of your situation are. I don't know if she's bluffing or she's telling the truth. I don't even know if you're obligated to leave just because she threatens you. Like I don't know. And you don't know because you're asking us. So unfortunately, it's time to hire legal counsel. I can't give you any information other than that because there's just so many variables here. I could tell you don't leave the home, but then maybe she will serve you with that. I could tell you to stay in the house or to leave, but then maybe you're relinquishing some of your rights when it comes to the divorce. I don't know. You need to hire legal counsel, and you need to take this threat very, very seriously because it sounds like she's wanting to play hardball. And so, you know, fortunately, when I went through my situation, she didn't want to play hardball, and I didn't either. And so we didn't have to. But had she done that, you bet your ass I would have dug in my heels and I would have went to freaking war. But I didn't. Yeah. And I'm grateful. And I'm not even saying that as a threat. I'm really glad I didn't have to. But you better believe I would have. And it sounds like you better start gearing up for a battle. I hate to hear it, but it sounds like that's where you're at.
Yeah. All right. Go Gidry Go, or David. I have been dealing with a major depressive disorder, or according to my shrink. I struggle with motivation, and the just do it that used to be enough doesn't seem to cut it anymore. We're working on meds to help, but that's not the long-term solution. Have you ever dealt with something like this? And if so, do you have any advice or insights into breaking the procrastination stronghold? I know that's probably foreign to you, but I thought I'd ask anyway. I admire your drive, consistency, and transparency, so I'm going to keep listening until something clicks. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. It sounds like you're getting the help you need through a therapist, which I would highly suggest. I don't think that's the one-stop solution, though. I think dealing with and confronting problems that maybe even are subconscious is a good idea, but I don't know that that always addresses the root of the problem in every circumstance. So when I hear you talk about this, this is actually to go back to the previous testosterone question. I can't help but wonder if you should go get your blood work drawn up. A therapist may or may not recommend that. I don't know if they have, but you have that therapy, which is good, but then there might be some other medical information that you need to gather. And so I would highly suggest working with a doctor that I wouldn't say exclusively works with men, but has a aptitude or an expertise in working with men in the type of situations that you're finding yourself in. And what they might do is they might, as an initial test, is do a blood panel for you. And that blood panel can be very revealing with regards to testosterone or nutrient deficiencies. So it might just be more than your mind. There actually might be physiological issues going on in your body that you could actually improve through something like testosterone replacement, or changing up your diet, or changing up your daily practices like consuming more meat, or changing your diet to work a little bit more appropriately with your body. So I would go that route if you haven't done that already. So you're getting the mindset stuff taken care of. Take a look at the physiological stuff through a medical professional who can get a blood panel drawn up for you. And then the other component is I would take a look at the spiritual element as well. I don't want to neglect that. I think that trifecta of mental, physical, and spiritual really will help you find purpose and meaning. I'm talking specifically about the spiritual side. Help you find purpose, meaning, a greater plan to your existence, maybe even give you a path to run on, inspire you, give you some hope and optimism towards your the infinite possibilities of you and your life and what our lives will look like beyond our current existence, our mortal existence. I would look at those two. You didn't bring those up, so maybe you're not doing them, maybe you are, but those are two areas I would definitely look into.
Yeah. Have you, if you don't mind me asking, have you dealt with this? Like, have you had major depression, and what got you through?
I think I'm I think I'm an angry enough person. I say that kind of like lighthearted, but an angry enough person that being depressed would just piss me off and I would just fight against it. I'm not going to say I don't get depressed, but I'm not chronically depressed. There's moments of depression, I would say, where it's like I'm feeling down or feeling sorry for myself. Of course, we all have that. But when I get that way, it pisses me off. And then I go work and I get over it. And I'm not telling you to just get over it. So please don't hear what I say and think, well, Ryan said I just need to get over it. I don't think, I mean, yeah, sure. In some cases, you just need to, sack up and drive on. But not all cases. And I see the gray area in that more than maybe I saw before. So yeah, some instances just suck it up and drive on. And in other instances, you do need some additional help. But personally, and fortunately for me, when I get down, I'm like, okay, shit, what can I do? Fix it. Like, I'm not going to sit around and just like wallow in so fix it. And I don't think less of anybody who might not be there. That just happens to be my personality. And so that mentality has helped me.
Yeah.
What about you? Is this something you've dealt with?
I think, I think it's something I've dealt with. I've seen it in the lives of loved ones. Often I find it interesting, and obviously I'm not a shrink, so I can't, I don't know clinically if this is accurate, but often it's tied to a shift of identity where we put our value of who we are and the role that we play in the world into something, and that's been disruptive. And it's no longer present. And we're confronted with that, and there's a sense of loneliness and loss of identity in it. That comes to mind. And I think it could be an amazing experience too, right? Because on the flip side of that, or on the back side of that, is what? So who are you then?
Creating a new identity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so I get that. One thing, and maybe to consider, David, for yourself, and this is usually where if I have an upset and I'm kind of unmotivated, I'm kind of like in a bad place, it's usually one of three things. The first is that, and this is where the identity kind of comes in, is unmet expectations. There is something I expected it to be, and it's not ending up that way. And I'm left to deal with it. But often in expectations, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, is we usually just sit with it shouldn't be or it should be this way, and we don't complete the thought of, well, it's not. So what are you going to do? And actually taking action makes you feel better. In fact, scientifically, one of the best ways to get past resentment and frustration is to do something about it, because we move from being victim, being acted upon, to taking ownership, and that empowers people, right? So if there's expectations that are not met, complete the thought. Okay, it's not that way. So what am I going to do, and start taking action towards it? Number two, something is incomplete. Something's not said that should be said. And you've been waiting and hoping maybe for someone else to address it, for them to change before you address it, for the circumstance to be ideal for you to address it. You need to get complete with it. And I don't know a better word than get complete. But trust me, I think that resonates for most people. That relationship with mom, that issue with dad, that conversation that I've been avoiding with whoever. There's value in addressing those and getting complete with them. And then the third is we're out of integrity. We're showing up in the world. We're doing things that we know we shouldn't be doing. And we're blaming, and we feel down because our self-confidence is eroded due to that lack of integrity. And often when we're out of integrity, we start blaming and getting frustrated with other people, and it perpetuates being disempowered. So unmet expectations, something needs to be communicated or complete something, or integrity. So try those 3 on.
That's awesome. I was actually taking notes because this is good for me too. This is why it's so powerful. You're much more eloquent than I am because I was writing these down and you're elaborating on these. I'm like, okay, deal in reality, be honest, and live in integrity. You know, it's like, man, if I know when I am acting in accordance with those 3 virtues, it's powerful. I'm unstoppable. I feel like I'm on fire.
Yeah.
That point number 2 where you said something is incomplete, I think there might be a discrepancy between what you said and what I said about being entirely honest. Honesty is being truthful and transparent with other people who are involved in your decision-making process. So, for example, if you get into an argument with your wife or your girlfriend and you guys are bickering and fighting over who knows what, but you feel a certain way, I don't think you should withhold that. That to me is not being honest. If something she did frustrated you and you're just trying to wash it over and fix the relationship without expressing how you feel about it, it's only going to be a matter of time before it blows up again. And I'm not saying you need to rub it in her face or yell at her or be aggressive about it, but it could be something as simple as, hey, hon, you know, when we were arguing the other day, I heard you say something and it made me feel this way. And I'm willing to move on and forgive and I want to drive on and have a good relationship. But I think it's important that I tell you how I feel and how it makes me feel when I hear those types of things. That's honesty. Or let's say you have an employee at work and they don't perform to the degree that you know they could. It's not right to leave them in the dark because you don't want to ruffle feathers and then just let them continue to struggle with the same thing because you were unable or unwilling to have the conversation. So it's, hey, Kipp, you took on this assignment and I asked you to do X, Y, and Z. And I asked you to do X, Y, and Z because you're so capable and you're such an incredible worker and you're in integrity and you're honest and you do a great job. But man, I really feel like we didn't get the best from you. And here's why. What do you think about it? Like, we owe it to people to be honest, even if it's uncomfortable. Yep. And that's why, I think it aligns nicely with what you were saying about something's incomplete, usually between 2 different people. Because the other category, something is incomplete, it falls in line with your third point, which is you're just out of integrity. You said you'd do something and you didn't.
Yeah. No, that's well said. And it's funny, like we talk about, no more Mr. Nice Guy. One of the terms that we use from that book a lot is covert contracts. Those all just be covert contracts all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't communicate to that employee. They're underperforming. You don't think you show up differently? You don't think you withhold information, that you're looking for evidence that they're under? Like, dude, you'll go into a psychological battle with that person and almost make them fail because you decided to have a covert contract to not say something.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, man. So just be honest. Anyways, all right, what's next? Good points.
I love it. T. Woods 2918. What helped you get through your divorce or any other big challenge in life the most?
I'm actually going to just default to what we just talked about.
Yeah.
That's it. So for me, okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Getting through my divorce. Number 1, dealing in reality. You said unmet expectations. When I started to really get over my divorce is when I realized it was over.
It's over, yeah.
Because I had this expectation, even if it was a little fragment in my mind, that we could reconcile. And because I had that expectation and she didn't, there was a discrepancy and it created a lot of frustration and contention for me. It wasn't until, and there was a specific moment, and I never get into the details because I committed that I wouldn't. And it's not bad by any means, but it's an interaction that we had. And she said something to me, and it was really hurtful. And she wasn't actually trying to be hurtful. I don't think she was. But she said something, and it hurt. It really stung. But for the first time, it made me realize, oh, this is done. Like, this is over. And as difficult as it was, I got very emotional. I started tearing up. I left because I was very emotional about it. As difficult as it was actually really liberating for me. It took a couple of days. Don't get me wrong. But it was very liberating because now I was dealing in reality that this is done and you can chalk it up and you can close the chapter and you can start moving forward. So point number one, dealing in reality, you said unmet expectations. Number two, something's incomplete. So for me, it was a lack of ownership on my part, what I did in the relationship. You know, what the way I did show up and the way that I didn't show up, and what lessons can be learned. And so I had to be honest, not with her necessarily, that was all evident, but I had to be honest with myself about what I did to cause this breakdown. Now, did she have a part to play? Of course. Because again, it takes two to tango. I can't consume myself with that though. I can only consume myself with what I'm dealing with. So point number two, being entirely honest, in this case, with myself. And then number three, living in integrity. I had to stop drinking. That was a big issue. So putting alcohol aside, not drinking, getting back to the gym, getting back into this business really helped. Getting right with my kids. In fact, to go back to point number two, being entirely honest, I had to have conversations with my kids about some of these issues that was not comfortable by any means. But the more I started to live into this, and I didn't even really know, Kip, until you put this framework behind it, that this is what I was doing. Man, this was really, really powerful. And I'm in a really healthy spot right now. I'm in a great relationship. The relationship I have with my kids is growing and getting better. The business is doing well. I feel good about myself. I'm in really good shape. Everything is firing on all cylinders. And I have to remain vigilant in these 3 points. Otherwise, it could be very easy for me to slip back and default into old patterns and old habits. I was actually thinking about it over the weekend because I get so many questions like this one. I think I'm going to put together some sort of mini, I don't know if it's a course or a boot camp or a training. I don't really know what this looks like, but I think I'm going to put something together along the lines of dealing with divorce and it's exclusively for men. And if you're going through a divorce or a separation, what steps can you take over a 3 to 6 month period in order to grieve, process it, learn from it, move on, and then develop a better, more healthy relationship at some point in the future when you're in the position to do that. It seems like, I don't want to get totally spiritual, but I really believe that we're presented with opportunities cloaked as challenges. And what I've gone through over the past couple of years has been very challenging personally, but there's also a tremendous opportunity. And I think God says, hey, you know what? Here's what you're going to deal with. And I'm not saying he did this, I did it, but he works in our favor and he can take anything that we may be experiencing and he can turn it into something productive and righteous and good. And so as much as I'm not saying it's God's fault for putting me in this circumstance, it's not. God has presented an opportunity for me to take this information and share it with somebody who might be dealing with the same thing, who maybe doesn't have the same perspective, or maybe I can introduce two guys who really resonate and they work together and help solve each other's problems. And I think there's a really good opportunity here to help men in what seems to be an increasing at an exponential rate. And I think there's some opportunities here to really help some men deal with this stuff.
Yeah. One thought really quick for T. Woods on dealing with like a difficult life challenge. Sometimes I feel like we can be dealing in reality, we can be complete in our relationships, we can have integrity, and we're just overran, right? There's too much or whatever. That's where I think also the consideration or the value of prioritize and execute. Just prioritize, right? You can't do it all. So what's the top priority? Act on the top priorities. Forget about everything else. And that's sometimes when there's a lot of overwhelm, there's value because we feel like we have to address it all. And sometimes you can't. And you just pick the top items, deal with those, and start taking action.
Yeah, good call. Okay, cool, what's next?
That's all our questions.
Got them all. Went through them all? Dang.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, look at us.
Well, guys,
All
you
right.
had some great questions. I mean, taking on accountability, testosterone, the mental side of the equation, dealing in divorce. I mean, these are so common. We hear these things all the time. And I just want to make a quick little pitch to you guys. And I think it's really, really important. I started something 8 years ago called the Iron Council. A lot of you guys are familiar with it. And I started it because I needed to band with other really good men who could help me navigate some of these issues that we're talking about: doubt, anxiety, divorce, mental illness, and all these concerns that we have. And it was hard to do it alone. And I think a lot of guys are going out alone thinking that somehow something's going to change. Like their life's going to change, or they're just going to pick up something through osmosis. I don't really quite know what it is guys are expecting, but we have a tool, and I want you to join us. And if it's something that works for you, great. And if you come in and you stick around for 30 days or 90 days or 120 days and that's all you need from us, great. But we have a real tremendous opportunity here to serve each other, to help each other, to learn and grow and to push and to be accountable and hold other accountable to their goals and desires and dreams. So we're opening this back up in 2 weeks, and I want to have the biggest enrollment that we've ever had in the Iron Council, because it seems like after 8 years, we need this now more than we did 8-9 years ago. And that might just be because I'm immersed in the discussion, but I don't think so. I think objectively more and more men are struggling, even though there's more and more information out there designed for your growth. So if you want to band with us, you want to connect with us, you want to connect with other guys, you want to talk about these issues and not just talk about them, but actually really get into the nitty gritty of what you actually do on a step-by-step basis to deal with divorce, to deal with mental illness, to deal with a coworker or a boss that you're not happy with, to deal with self-doubt. We have all of those tracks to run on. New fathers, learning how to hunt. Some is just fun and other is really serious. But we've got it all. And you can check it out at orderman.com/Iron Council. We open it up again in about 2 weeks. So just drop your name in there. I'll send you an email on June 15th, and you'll be able to join us and band with us. That's what we want. You need to be there. If you're asking these questions and you're having these sort of concerns and issues in your life, it goes well beyond me and you, Kipp, answering it for 5 minutes on an AMA. So let's jump in fully. Orderman.com/Iron Council.
To also join us on Facebook, you can go to facebook.com/group/Order of Man. Call out from earlier. Follow Mr. Michler on Instagram and X at Ryan Michler. And of course, you can get your latest Order of Man swag at the Order of Man store. That's store.orderofman.com.
Awesome. Guys, again, great questions. We will be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.